Well, welcome in Falcha to Random Thoughts from County Antrim, and I'm your host, David McDonnell. This is Random Thoughts from County Antrim in County Antrim, Michigan, where I tell my half hour of various stories and historical information and yarns and tidbits and, as always, random thoughts. I've been, as I said last week, hard at work at my novel, and it's been taking me an awful long time. In fact, some people are been asking me what it's about. And I'll just tell you it's about war and peace, and love lost and love found, and family feuds and family togetherness, and travel across the Atlantic and within the U.S.A, and many, many other emotions, honor, glory, and anything else I can think of to make this a blockbuster, can't put down novel. So I'm at work, and those are the only hints I'm going to give you. Now, when I started this pandemic, or when I started this podcast, when the pandemic put us in lockdown, it was May of 2020 when I started this podcast, and I made the pledge then that I would not repeat any of my stories. I would do something different each half hour of this podcast. And when I run out of stories, that's when the podcast will end, perhaps. But my first two podcasts, the one in last week in May and the first week in June, were, I think those good stories, but they were poor productions. I didn't quite get the hang of this podcast thing. My brain is still a 20th century, maybe even a 19th century brain, so it took me a while to get everything in order. So I did agree, and I think I acknowledged this once before, to retell some of the stories I did in those first 2 weeks of Random Thoughts from County Antrim. And both of them, or actually the one I want to retell, is actually as apropos today as it was in May of 2020. Because you see, this whole pandemic thing reminded me of a piece that was supposedly written by John Cleese after a terrorist attack in the United Kingdom. And I'm about 99% sure that it was not written by John Cleese, but it's attributed to him on the internet. And as we all know, we can believe anything we read on the internet. In fact, I believe I once saw a quote from Abraham Lincoln, which said, we can all believe what is on the internet. So I will go with it as a John Cleese piece. But the piece was about the English reaction and the Scottish reaction and other European nations' reactions to terrorism. And I updated this piece to change it from terrorism to coronavirus, which I guess is a different form of terrorism. Plus, I added the Irish and the Americans to the mix. And so, when the coronavirus reached Europe, the English were miffed. And as infections increased and reached England, the English raised their level of concern to peeved. And then when English began to die from the virus, the level of concern was raised to irritated, and then to a bit cross. And the English have not been a bit cross since the Nazis bombed London. And then as the death toll continued to mount, the English went from tiresome and then to a bloody nuisance. And the English have not thought anything as a bloody nuisance since the Spanish Armada threatened the island. Now, when the Scots first heard of the coronavirus with the news from Wuhan, China, they were already pissed off. And then when the virus reached Scotland, the Scots increased their level of concern from pissed off to let's get the bastards. And the Scots don't have any other level of concern. They're either pissed off or let's get the bastards. Now the Irish are a bit more of a no worries kind of people. Certainly more so than either the Scots or the English. And that's because there are really only two possibilities. Either you are sick or you are healthy. And if you are healthy, then you really have nothing to worry about. Now, if you are sick, you really still only have two possibilities. Either you will recover or you will die. Now, if you recover, then you really have nothing to worry about. Now, if you die, you have but two possibilities. Two possibilities if you die. You will go to heaven or you'll go to hell. Now, if you go to heaven, there's really nothing to worry about. Now, if you go to hell, you will be too busy hanging around with all of your friends to have any time to worry at all. So why worry? Now, the Americans have not changed their level of concern since the virus found its way to North America. And it's been that way since the virus first hit in early 2020. And to this very day, there's only two reactions by Americans. And no one seems to have had both. Now, there's one group of Americans, and I don't know if it's half the population, but its number is significant. And their reaction when the virus first hit America was, what the fuck? The virus doesn't affect me or won't affect me, and I'm not going to let it affect my life. I don't care what they're doing in the rest of the world. I'm an American, and I have freedom to do whatever. And I will do whatever I want, whenever I want. And that reaction to the virus, when it first arrived, that was the same reaction by those folks when the death toll reached 100,000, and when it reached 200,000, and even when it reached 600,000. What the fuck? Same reaction when the Delta variant made the virus even more transmissible and more dangerous. Same reaction when more and more young people became infected. And soon, my fear is the virus will start affecting very young people. The very young will get sick and hopefully will not, but maybe even die. And the reaction of those Americans will be, what the fuck? Shit happens. Now there's another group of Americans, the other half, or at least the other, I don't know if it's half or more than half. I think it's more than half. But their reaction since they first heard of the virus hitting America was, what the fuck? And when the death toll mounted, their reaction was, what the fuck? And when the Delta variant proved to be very transmissible, yet again their reaction was, what the fuck? So I guess in a sense, Americans are of like mind on how to deal with the virus, or how to react to the virus. There's near unanimity in the attitude of virtually every American can be summed up in just those three words. It's only a difference in the tone of voice when you say those three words. Now, I guess I'm a little bit more Irish than either Scottish or English in that regard. I don't worry too much about the virus. I mean, I do worry about it, but I'm not terribly stressed out about it. I already told my family that to keep the screws of my coffin loose if I should die of the virus. And that way, wherever I'm going, I can get a head start. But truth be told, I'm not terribly worried about myself. I'm only worried about others, particularly my family. And I'm going to try to keep them safe. I've been trying to keep them safe from this virus. Now, I think I told you once before that I'm retired. And I'm in lockdown. And that has a different effect on your perception of time. Now, time is important, of course. We all waste time, and in a world that kind of prizes work ethic, wasting time is not a good thing. We should be as productive as we can be. Of course, we should. And you remember the proverb, a stitch in time saves nine. Well, what the hell does that mean? It actually doesn't really mean anything about time. It's about addressing problems early, or else it might become a much bigger problem later. It's an old English proverb. It is, I believe, in Poor Richard's Almanac, assembled by Benjamin Franklin. But it's older than Benjamin Franklin. It's one of the many, many old proverbs which Franklin collected and published. But what does it mean? It's one of the many proverbs that addresses procrastination. And these were usually told in verse because they were easier to remember in verse. Sometimes false rhymes for the same thing, such as time and nine, which are really false rhymes. But it helps you remember. A stitch in time saves nine. So time saves nine what? It's an allusion to sewing, actually, and to hole in clothing. If you have a small hole in your shirt, you can fix it now with one stitch. Now, if you do not do that repair, the hole will grow larger. And it may take 9 stitches to repair that hole. So a stitch in time saves 9. Now, all of that reminded me, about time, and time being important to some people and less important to others. And it reminded me of a story of a Irish farmer I know. He's from County Cavan. He's got a small farm. He raises pigs. And it's not a great farm in terms of fertility, so he doesn't grow much, but he does raise pigs. And he doesn't do much with his pigs. He lets them roam around the field and into the woods. And they eat acorns and berries and leaves off plants. And they root around for whatever they can find. And of course he throws his garbage in one big pile, and the pigs come along and they'll eat that as well. And one day the county farm agent came by, and he toured the farm and watched the hogs roam free. And he was puzzled by this because it wasn't really the most efficient way to raise pigs, and he wanted to be helpful because that's what the local farm agents do. So he went up to the farmer and he told him, he says, you ought to keep your hogs in a pen and feed them with commercial grade pig feed. And on a balanced diet like that, the hogs will grow fatter, larger, in a much, much shorter time, and you can get them to market much, much quicker. And you see, the time was the crux of that argument. He said, this will save you a lot of time, the farm agent said. And my friend, the hog farmer, just kind of took off his hat, scratched his head, a bit perplexed. And then he said, what's time to a hog? And that's kind of how I feel. It describes my life today. I used to practice a profession where I had to, where I valued efficiency, and I had deadlines, and I had commitments, and there was a great deal of stress. And the more time I saved on one matter, the more time I could spend on the next. And my attitude has changed totally since then. Saving time doesn't mean that much to me anymore. And this notion accelerated during the pandemic, since there are limits to what I can do anyway. I mean, I get out now, but still not as much as I did pre-pandemic. And I guess in a sense, I've simply turned into a hog. Now, I think the other thing I did when I looked at my notes from that first podcast is that I offered a discount, which I haven't republished in the subsequent podcast. What I said then, and I'm going to hold to, is that for the duration of the pandemic, my publisher, Burrowing Owl Press, has reduced the price of Clandonnell, A Storied History of Ireland, from its list price of $34.95 to the low price of $29.95. And also, since then, I got the My Pillow guy to issue a certify its quality from the My Pillow Association. And the publisher also reduced the price of Buy the Horse a Guinness from its list price of $25.95 to only $23.95. And if you live in America, I'll ship them to you free. Unfortunately, shipping costs out of America are atrocious, so I'm going to have to pass that cost down to you. But I'll pay for the shipping. Now, if you order both, Buy the Horse a Guinness and Clandonnell, I'll combine the price and sell them, both of them, for $50. Now, take a look at my website, and you'll see some more of my writings and more of my stories. And I think I'm wrapping this up much earlier than I thought I would, because I'm anxious to get back to my novel. So maybe I'll just tell you one more story. It's about a elderly couple, been married for many, many decades. And the wife one day just came up to the husband and said, we just need to start thinking about what happens should one of us pass on. And she said, I've been a bit curious, so I must ask you, if I die, would you remarry? The husband said, I don't really want to talk about such things. I'm not going to answer that question. I don't know what I'm going to do should something happen to you. So I'm just not going to answer your question. So the wife was quiet for a while, and several hours later, though, she came up to her husband and said, I really do want an answer to that question. If something should happen to me and I died, would you remarry? The husband said the same thing. Again, he says, I don't know why you're talking about this. I don't want to talk about this, and I really don't want to answer the question. And she said, no, I really do want an answer. So the husband said, well, yes, maybe I would. I probably would remarry if something should happen to you. So the husband figured that was the end of the conversation, but it wasn't. A few moments later, the wife said, well, if you remarried, would you live in this house? The husband said, yes, I would live in this house. I love this house. I built it. It's got everything where I want it. Of course I would live in the house. I would never sell this house and move somewhere else. So yes, if I remarried, I would live in this house. So the wife kind of thought about that answer for a while, and then she finally asked yet another question. She said, if you lived in this house after you remarried, would you still sleep in this bed? He said, yes, it's my bed. I mean, we paid a lot of money for that bed. I'm not going to sell the bed. It's a perfectly good bed. Why would I sell that bed? Yes, I would stay in this house if I remarried, and I would still sleep in that bed. So the wife was still a little bit perplexed by that. I mean, she pursued the questions, but she was a little perplexed by that answer. So maybe it wasn't quite what she had expected. So she asked one more question. Well, you wouldn't sell the house and you wouldn't sell the bed, but would you sell my golf clubs? And the husband said, yes, I would sell your golf clubs. The wife said, well, why wouldn't you sell my golf clubs? Why would you sell my golf clubs? You kept my bed, you kept my house, but you would sell my golf clubs? Why? Husband said, well, she's left-handed. And that's the end of that story. Nothing to do with Ireland, but it's one of my favorite stories that I've heard quite a while ago. I wanted to see if I could retell it. So I think that's the end of our podcast today. Please do take a look at the website, clandonnell.net. Take a look at our Facebook page at Clandonnell. Send me an email, clandonnell@gmail.com. Please like and share this video. And can't like and share me on TikTok because I'm still not on TikTok. But I think this is our last podcast. It is our last podcast of the month of August. Assuming there's not a miraculous cure, an end to the coronavirus, I will be back next month, first Sunday in September. Thank you.